Hello, and welcome to the first video lecture for the course. I'm Dr. Jonina Anderson Lopez. I'll be grading and facilitating discussion posts and the major assignments. It's possible that another instructor is facilitating the course, and if so, please review the lecture portions of this video, noting that the details about assignments may be different from what you see in the module. Week one is about the basics, like the rise of detective fiction, origins, the 19th century, and assignments for week one. We'll start with some of the factors that contributed to the rise of detective fiction. First, there was the development of scientific methods. Scientific advances of the 19th century, including the study of criminal behavior, forensic science, fingerprinting, all these types of things provided new tools for solving crimes that could be incorporated into detective stories. Then there were social and political changes. The Industrial Revolution and urbanization created new social problems and opportunities for crime. Detective stories provided a way for readers to explore and understand these changes. There's also the popularity of serialized fiction. Many detective stories were first published as serialized stories in newspapers and magazines, which allowed for cliffhangers and suspenseful endings that kept readers coming back for more. What are the ancient origins of detective fiction? While the modern detective fiction genre is generally considered to have emerged in the 19th century, there are earlier examples of detective stories and investigations from ancient civilizations that have influenced this genre. One of the earliest examples of detective fiction comes from ancient China. The Judge Dee stories, written in the 18th century by a Chinese author, were based on an actual Tang Dynasty judge. These stories followed Judge Dee as he solved crimes and brought criminals to justice, using his wit and knowledge of the law to uncover clues and solve mysteries. Another earlier example of detective fiction can be found in the plays of the Greek playwright Sophocles. In his play Oedipus Rex, the titular character is a detective of sorts, trying to uncover the truth behind a murder in the city of Thebes. The Roman poet Ovid also wrote a detective story in his Metamorphoses. In the story titled The Story of Perseus, the hero solves a mystery by finding the culprit who's been stealing women's clothing. In addition to these examples, there are many other myths and stories that feature detectives or investigations of some kind, including the biblical story of Daniel and the Babylonian court, the Norse legends of dragons. These stories have all influenced the development of detective fiction over the centuries, helping to shape the genre as we know it today. Now let's revisit why detective fiction emerged as an important genre in the 19th century. There was the growth of literacy. As these literacy rates increased, more people were able to read and enjoy books and newspapers. This created a larger audience for detective fiction. There was the urbanization and rise of crime. The growth of cities brought with it new social problems and opportunities, as we mentioned. This created a demand for stories because people wanted to understand, why was this happening? How do I fit into this new narrative? And additionally, there were the scientific advances that we talked about from earlier, and an influence of other genres. Detective fiction is kind of a melding of other popular genres of the time, like gothic fiction, sensational fiction, adventure stories. There was the development of some iconic detectives like Sherlock Holmes, Miss Marple, so many more, which helped to establish the conventions of the genre to create a lasting interest in detective fiction. Overall, the rise of detective fiction in the 19th century reflected a growing interest in crime and its investigation, as well as a fascination with science, logic, rational thinking. These factors all contributed to the emergence of the genre as an important literary form in the 19th century and its continued popularity today. So, as you're heading into the readings for week one, these are some major concepts to consider. And then once you dive into the assorted assignments, I hope this video lecture will help you understand their purpose and where to find the content in the module. This week you have some story excerpts, and some of them you could read and you can listen to. You also have optional assignments. The first one being citing sources style corner. Why should you complete an optional assignment that is worth 0 points? I don't offer too many of these throughout the semester, but I offer a few. And I do this because it's a low stakes way for you to get practice for things that you might not have encountered in a while, especially if you've been out of school. Um, it will help you to acclimate to maybe sentence structure, or this one is all about citing sources. That is a necessary skill for this and for other courses. So consider accessing the optional worksheet for week one. Every week you have a quiz to complete. This week is no different. Quizzes are always due on Saturdays, and they cover a variety of questions, most of them about the fictional or sometimes the non-fictional readings for that week. And sometimes the questions are multiple choice. Sometimes you have to type in an answer. And if you have to type in an answer, these will not be graded until I update and grade the entire quiz, because I have to first read your answer. Next, you have 3 discussion posts. You usually are only going to have 2, but this week there are 3. The first discussion is asking you very simple questions like about the syllabus, and it's basically a way for student services to know that you're participating in the course and for them to disseminate your financial aid. The second discussion is introductions, and it's you telling the class about yourself, trying to use the insert the video feature. If you can't figure it out, just let me know and just type your answer, and that's fine. I don't want you to get hung up on trying to use the video feature, even though it's not too complicated, but no pressure. Basically, I just want to know about you, and I want you to share that with your classmates and also tell us which 2 novels you picked from the Google Doc list that you can access in the modules. So make sure when you're reviewing that document that you read all of the instructions at the top of the document. Don't just scroll down to the list, even though the list is super interesting. But one important part of choosing your 2 stories for this semester is that one story cannot be UK or US based. And so on the screen, you can see the arrow pointing at some of the international stories that have a global perspective. This class is about understanding the detective genre, but from a global perspective. So you can pick a US or UK based story as one of your options. And the second story must be an international story. So remember that as you're reviewing the long list of stories on the doc. For the third discussion, you are asked to adopt a formatting method for the entirety of the course, APA or MLA. It's also asking you to compare and contrast two stories from the module. This is a way to practice for project 2 later on, because that draft, the project 2 final draft, asks you to compare and contrast two stories from the course. And that's why you have to pick two stories at the start of the course. In this last discussion post, you're going to practice integrating a quote. To learn more about quote integration, visit the link in the discussion, which features examples like you see on the screen. The two sentences that are boxed on the screen are examples of how you can integrate a quote. So you want to directly quote or paraphrase an example from a story to help you make a point that you're typing into the discussion forum. Your post for any of the discussions, the content is due by Sunday night. Your responses to the introduction post and the compare and contrast post, your responses to your peers are due by Tuesday. Each discussion has a rubric at the bottom. So you can click on it and see the requirements and the points that you could earn. Most of them are 20 points. Some of them are more as we get into the later weeks. Whenever I grade your discussion, I use the forum rubric, but I then also offer you text-based feedback. This includes a list of what I reviewed and if you met certain expectations or not. And sometimes I give you a bit more detail rather than yes or no. And I'll even include a link to kind of help you out. If you have any questions about the module or a specific question about an assignment, don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks for reviewing the video lecture and have a great rest of your week.